was in Miami a number of years ago and needed to get a rental car. And I don't know how many of you experienced this, where you're in a city and you go to the rental car place and they have like a whole package that will help cover all the fee, like the toll fees while you're driving around the city. Has anyone experienced that? And you're always like, absolutely not. Somehow you're ripping me off. Like, you're making money on the money I'm already going to pay for something, so I'm not going to pay you. I'll figure it out directly, or I'll just figure out a way to avoid all of the tolls because I'm not going to pay extra money. And so Caitlin was with me, my wife, and we go on the trip, and we said, no, we've got this. I looked at the toll map, I asked him questions, and I had a very bulletproof way of avoiding any fees. We were there for 3 days. We drive around carefree, enjoying ourselves, exploring, avoiding toll lanes, all those things. We dropped the car off. And part of checking out and making sure everything is good, they hand you a final invoice, and that final invoice looked to the tune of $420 in toll fees. And I was very confused / enraged at what just happened, because whatever plan I created did not work. And I was like, this doesn't make sense. You guys told me this, you told me that, and none of it came true. And definitely now, $420 is a lot of money, and even then was like, I don't have just $420 to pay them. So what happened in that moment is I just turned to frustration. We were checking out, and I'm just like frustrated with the people. I don't want to talk to the person in the booth that finally that lets you out with the little plastic arm thing to let your car out. I'm like not talking to Caitlin. I'm just like, I am so frustrated right now. I'm enraged. Like, I am affected by this in a way that now is disrupting the way I'm actually relating to other people. I just wonder this morning, are you aware of the ways in which your relationship to money affects the way in which you relate to people? Or maybe even relate to yourself? I had another recent one, even just a couple weeks ago. I spent 3.5 hours on the phone with Cover California on Friday trying to resolve something with money that looks like 10 times our normal health insurance premium to try and resolve. And I'm like, this is the worst. Like, I am frustrated by this. I don't have this. But again, presented with an opportunity to wonder and look at what's my relationship and how do I operate when money becomes a thing. And it could be even a scenario where maybe it's like the hurt thing like that. You don't have it. Or it could be the thing where maybe you have much of it. There's seasons when you have a lot of money. I would still be curious of how does that affect the way you relate to yourself, to other people, and maybe even with God. Have you thought about recently the ways in which you relate to your money? What we want to do this morning, briefly, as we continue and conclude our series, Sacred Resistance, is actually explore what it looks like to resist ourselves in relationships, not only with money, but just with our stuff. The series has been a way of inviting us to actually turn to something more sacred so that we can resist ourselves. We can resist maybe the things inside of us that tend to pull us apart and separate us from other people. Maybe it's the need of control. Maybe it's the out of control desires that we have. Maybe it's just the frustrations, the anxieties, the worries that continue to show up in our life day in and day out. And rather than just adding more to your to-do list, rather than adding something where you and I need to muster up more energy to become more good and beautiful and kind, and it may be beyond just adding goals to your year, which I'm sure are good, what if it actually looks like slowing down and resisting something so that God's Spirit can actually renew you and I so that we can become the people that we hope others would be? We could become the people that we hope we could be. We could even become the people that I would argue God made us to be. Good and kind and patient and beautiful. People that are like repairing the world and all that's broken. And it may not be in doing more, but it might be resisting in yourself. Because the way in which you naturally go is towards yourself. Each week we've been saying that those that devote themselves to themselves eventually lose themselves. Still a mouthful every time I say it. I don't expect you to remember it. But you know these people. You watch them. And they seem to be so self-absorbed that they're just entirely losing themselves. They're losing all sense of meaning and purpose. And it seems that chaos and destruction continue to ensue. What areas in your life might you be devoting yourself to yourself? And how might we resist ourselves so that we don't lose ourselves? We're going to continue in some of Jesus' teaching here. We find ourselves in chapter 6 of Matthew in what's called the Sermon on the Mount. And Jesus says this, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy, and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." When he's talking about treasure here, and mind you, he has a group of people surrounding him that he's talking to on the side of a hill, and many are oppressed and poor. You also have these religious leaders and the elite who are listening in because they're curious of how someone could be going along and relating to people who would be below the socioeconomic echelon of what people respect. And he's talking to each of them, and he says these things that seem to be challenging them, because I don't know about you, but this challenges me. Do not store up for yourselves treasures. And what ends up happening is that your heart ends up where your treasures are. And when he talks about treasures, it's not just your money. The broader term here would be your stuff. Broader term would be your stuff. Your car, your household, your items inside of it. The things that consume you day in and day out that you consume. And I think the question for us here then is, do you have stuff or does your stuff have you? Do not store up for yourself treasures on earth, because they will all go. And what's going to end up happening is you're just going to follow the ways of everything that you have. It's almost like they bind you in a certain way. And he's proposing this as if there is a different way for you and I to go. And so he says this, "The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness?" Starts talking about, he started with a heart, now he's moving to an eye. And what does this mean for the eye to be the lamp of the body? And what he's ultimately getting to here, most would say, is that how do you view the world? The way in which you and I look out to the world is actually going to inform the way we operate, who we become, how we relate to other people, how we relate to ourselves, and how we relate to God. Many would say that if you're looking for it, you'll find it. If you're looking for it, you'll find it. If you're looking for trouble, you can easily find it. If you're looking for something to be angry about, you're going to find it. If you're looking for all that is wrong, you're going to find all that is wrong. This is proposing to us that when you look out to the world, when you look out around you, can you have a healthy eye, a singular eye, an eye of generosity? Do you have a worldview that gives the benefit of the doubt? Do you look out around you and think, man, there must be something greater going on here because I can't see the good in it? Do you look out with patience and kindness and gentleness and self-control? Or do you look out with skepticism and pessimism? What's the word? Skepticism. What's the other one? Suspicion. There's another one. Like, what's your starting point? Do you have a healthy eye? Because what that's going to do is it's going to form the way you operate. If you have an unhealthy eye and you look for all that's wrong, you are going to change. You are going to become bound up. You are going to become controlling. You're going to become one who cannot trust or even be trustworthy. You and I actually start to become the things in which we look out towards. And I don't know about you, but again, we look at this and I would offer to you, if we look out with that kind of an eye, we become the type of people who devote ourselves to ourselves and we eventually lose ourselves. Do you look out with generosity? Do you believe that there is a God who's doing something beyond what you and I can see? Do you believe that there is a God who loves that person more than you could ever imagine or not imagine? Do you believe that there is still good and beauty and things that are right that you and I get to look towards and participate in? Do you have a healthy eye? because what you look for, you'll find it. Dallas Willard says this: the singular healthy eye is one that is fixed on God, is an eye that sees God as the sole treasure worth having. And it treasures the things that have their value, their true value in his kingdom. To have a healthy eye is to see everything in light of God's abundance, not in the scarcity mindset that turns our focus inward, leading to greed and anxiety. Generosity flows naturally from a life lived with a healthy eye, for it recognizes that what we all have is from God and for others. Could you imagine a world in which people had a singular healthy eye? Could you imagine if everyone operated with generosity and kindness towards others, that worry and anxiety could just dissipate and fall off, the need to protect and to control? On small level, we're selfish. On a large level, we go to war. Do we look out to the world and look for goodness and beauty and let that affect us on the inside? Because then lastly, he says here, no one can serve two masters. Either you'll hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. I've said this one before, and it sticks with me so well. When my dad first came back from one of the times in Haiti, he pulled up to our driveway and looked at our house and just felt this overwhelming sense that he is owned by it. As he looked across the vastness of our lawn and the 20-something hundred square foot house and the 400 sprinklers he'd probably spent time fixing all the time, and the stupid pool that he had to clean constantly, we were no help. But it's like I just got back from something that I did something inside of me that I want to give my life to more, but there's this stuff that keeps me from doing more of it. And Jesus doesn't necessarily go and rebuke possessions. At certain moments he calls people, are you willing to follow me over your possessions? And he doesn't say that money is evil. He says the love of money is a root of all evil. What's our relationship to our stuff? Do you have stuff, or does it have you? Because what's happening here in a long string of a sermon that we call the Sermon on the Mount, the next thing he starts to talk about is worry. And I don't have time to fully get into that. But leading up to this, from fasting to prayer to generosity to living a life that is not bound to what we have or don't have, he next gets into, do not worry. You will have all that you need. For I am a good God who actually takes care of the birds and the flowers. How much more would I take care of you? And if you have an eye that looks for the bad, what you're mostly going to do is worry. And you're going to accumulate, and you're going to consume, and you're going to devote yourself to yourself, and you're going to eventually lose yourself. I love being able to look out and just see the generosity in this church. I love being able to look out and say that there's people here that are committed to a life of Jesus, and they are generous with their stuff, with their money. And what I most oftentimes see, and I think that matters more, is I see people who are generous with their life. Because that's what starts to affect most. We could give money and still be controlling people. We could give 30% of our income and still just be angry all the time. We could actually miss what God is trying to do in and through you by us just simply following through. I was telling somebody the other day, I was like, when I do online giving, I set up recurring giving. It goes right here to the church every month on the same day. Sometimes I lose sight of what's happening. Sometimes I don't feel it anymore. And I'm trying to find ways to feel that because I want to grow into a more beautiful, generous person. And I believe it's the feeling of giving these things away that God actually replaces with his Spirit and encourages us in a life of generosity. So before I wrap us up, I just want to do a couple things. I just want to talk to us about giving. That if you and I want to become people who are generous with our life, that are gracious and kind and beautiful people, one of the greatest practices that we do see throughout the scriptures is giving. Giving of our money, giving of our stuff, becoming more free from it. And there's historically throughout the church, there are ways in which we give. Primarily, we see giving to the poor. We see giving to the local church, and we see giving to the gospel. You might be familiar with the word gospel. If you're not, if you're new to church, if you're new to faith, you're trying to figure things out, the gospel simply is good news. And so I would argue when you don't hear good news, I wonder if it's the gospel. Blessed are the feet of those who bring good news, the scriptures say. And you and I, those that are following the ways of Jesus, if you're not, you're free from this. You don't have to give a dime. I would still argue it's a good practice for you. But if you're following the ways of Jesus, what you are doing is you're seeing your stuff as a way to forward what God is doing in his kingdom, to participate with something larger than ourselves. So rather than hearing more from me, I'm going to invite up Brian and Kim File, and they're going to share a little bit of just their story of giving. And we'll have an invitation to you if you would like to take us up on it afterwards. So we'll welcome up Brian and Kim, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I resonate a lot with this, and it's often a topic that I'm still always challenged and working through. But, you know, I think I was raised with not always the most healthy of finances, right? And growing up and realizing, I think as we got married, realizing that, like, you know, in scriptures that, like, everything is God's, right? Like our money, the way that we spend it, the way that we view it. And I know that God is still working in that, but realizing that as we began to kind of understand how money works and what God's, I guess, vision for that is, and with, you know, assistance from Andrew, my brother, of like understanding some principles, I think it's been something that's been powerful in our lives, and something that we've been able to not only set up our tithes and our reoccurring and give to the ministries where our heart is, but in the last few years, we even were able to set up an account that kind of just accrues through our budgeting app, right? Where we can meet those one-time needs that God speaks to, where, you know, there's a gal in Thailand who needs some funds for her schooling, right? And it's not a big deal for us to be able to allocate funds because God has given us those opportunities. And I think it's something that we're passionate about, want to be able to encourage others in as well.
I think for both of us over the years, we have seen, and what our passion comes from and what we're going to be able to do at the church is to see financial freedom for other people, because, you know, money, as we just said, like, it can totally control your life. It can control how you live, and we really feel strongly about being able to have freedom in that and give in that. And through the years, we've walked through and helped so many people, like, set up budgets and things like that. And what I hear over the years is like, but budgets are so restrictive and it controls our money, where it's actually the opposite. When you are able to budget your money and know where your money is going, it actually leads to so much freedom, and I would say even more generosity, because you know where your money is going. And so that is something that we're really excited about to be able to do pretty soon in Midtown. Do you want us to share what we're doing?
Yeah.
So we are going to be teaching the Dave Ramsey Financial Peace University course here at Midtown starting February 6th. 9th. February 9th. It's an opportunity for you all to kind of join if you want to take the class and really learn how to manage your money. Again, because this truly, we believe, and we have seen over the years, that this leads to freedom. And really, honestly, I feel like for me personally, what learning how to budget and handle our money well has really wrestled in my own heart is this idea of contentment, right? Because, like, you guys all know, we live in a society of here, now, immediately, Amazon. I mean, I just ordered something this morning. It's coming today. I'm like, that is wild. So that is our society, is just immediate satisfaction. And I would say the one thing about budgeting has worked in my heart is just this idea of contentment, of knowing that, you know, we have a goal that we're working for and we're not going to get it today. And it's probably actually not even going to be next week or next month. It might be in 3 months, and that's hard sometimes, but it's so good to process that contentment. Is like even looking around and being content with what we have, where we're at. That has just been huge in my own life and my own heart.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you, Brian and Kim. And I'll have a couple ways for you to kind of follow up on that here in a second. But what I hear in that is that there's something going on with their money and something going on with the way in which they're living. And they're living free from something so that they can do more with. One of the key things they said in there is that the budget actually becomes the thing that frees you up to be a generous person. What starts before that is, have you determined to be a generous person? Have you determined to be someone who is generous? Because if not, then you'll hope that you can be generous one day and you'll never get to it. And if you're young in the room, I would recommend starting this now because it only gets harder. When you get your first real job and you start to make more money and you start to think more and more that it's yours, it's all yours, it becomes harder because then you get in rhythms and practices that you're spending everything. Well, then what do you give? How do you give if you're spending everything? And so I'm going to give us a couple very practical things, just a quick handle, and then I'm going to wrap up my story and invite us into something. And lastly, before we pass those out, what we're talking about here, when we're talking about giving, relating to our stuff, again, it's deeper than just writing a check or going online, is that if those who devote themselves to themselves eventually lose themselves, what we're trying to do is be those who actually devote ourselves to something greater than ourselves so that we have more to show for ourselves than ourselves. If you thought the other one was a mouthful, there you go. But I know you know this. I know you've felt this. When you've done an act of generosity in your life, you experience more than what that money cost. You experience like you're a part of something greater that is working outwards towards others, the blessing to other people. That is your entire life. And what if you got to feel that more? Could you imagine if every single person thought, man, I'm going to give money to the poor, I'm going to give money to my church, and I'm going to give money to furthering God's good news in our world? You imagine if everyone did that? Everything that we normally pray about starts to dissipate. There's actionable things in which you and I get to do, and then we become more beautiful, good, kind, and gracious people. So what we're going to do is I'm going to invite the worship team back up. We're going to pass out some cards and some pens. I'm going to walk you through a couple things very quickly, and then I have a practice for us to try on. And as we're doing this, I'll finish my story. Quick note, the QR code on the top of that card does not work. It's a joke on you. You're going to try to click it. Maybe one day we'll be able to afford working QR codes. That was a total error by me. So what I want to invite you into is this thought. I just told that story earlier where I got the tickets and I had to pay them and I was frustrated and angry and I was just a bitter person that you wouldn't want to be around. And it took me about 24 hours, but there was a moment where I just said, all right, God, this sucks. This is an unwanted situation. I can't afford this, but I don't want to feel this. I don't want to feel bound to this. I don't want to feel frustrated. I want to be free from my money. I might have to pay this, but I don't even know the outcome yet. And so God, will you just give me peace? And what was neat is that happened. And I just had this feeling all right, cool. God's good. He's going to take care of this. And whether I have to pay it or not, we'll figure something out. And I got on the phone. I think we got back on a Saturday. I got on the phone that following Monday. And I call them, and I'm talking to the person on the phone. And I explain the whole situation, trying to use all my sales skills in the world to get out of it. And I didn't have to try very hard. She said, oh, no worries. Just kind of I'll just reduce it. I'm oh, really? By how much? She's well, typically we just start off with half. I'm oh, okay. So when you say you start off, can you do less? It went from $420 down to $23 or something like that, basically for the phone time. And so what I learned in that, whether I had to pay the money or not, was it worth worrying? Was it worth being frustrated? Was it worth relating differently? And the answer simply was no in that moment. And so even when I got this recent one from Calvert, California, just well, this sucks. I don't know, God, it's all yours. You just help me navigate this moment well. And we can be those people when we've determined to be generous, when we've already made the decision that our money is not ours and that we're stewards of it. Some of those most scary passages, and when God invites us to the idea that we're stewarding what he's offered us, and then he gets mad when we don't do well with it. He's what do you mean? You went and hid it under a rock? Why were you protecting it? I asked you to go do something with it. Responsibly, graciously, kindly. And so a few things, very practical. Let's go to that next giving slide. I'm not going to spend much time on these, but this bottom corner, priority percentage progressively and prompted. At some point, you and I need to determine that we're going to give as a priority. Before I spend, before I save, before I do it, I'm just going to grab something and say, man, I'm going to be a person that is generous. So may I give first? And then you can grow in the idea that then you're going to grab a percentage. Percentage is so helpful. We see a 10%. We see even a 23, 26% in the scriptures. But we see a 10% as a helpful gauge to get going on that. 10% might feel massive for you. Start at 1. Because then what you can do is you can increase a percentage easier than you can increase a number. And then what you do is you do progressive giving. If you've never given, give once. Try it on. Give something. It's like, okay, cool. I think I can do that again. Cool. Start giving consistently. Do it over and over and over again. Then you move towards a 10%, and what's real fun is moving beyond 10%. And I invite you to do this with my wife and I. We give 10% to our church every month, and then we look for ways above and beyond to do the prompting stuff. And that's what we moved to last. It's hard to do prompted giving when you haven't already chosen to be generous. You know, it's also easier. It's easier to say no when you're at like the checkout station and they're inviting you to like give like the remaining to something. It's easier to say no to that because you've already determined to give. And or it's easier to say yes to that because you've already determined to give. But you and I can be free from our stuff. And the sooner that we can catch this, the better. It's also never too late to begin. And so I encourage you and invite you to participate in giving here at Midtown. I believe in something enough to say it is going to get 10% of my income at least. Because we do. We have ways and want to continue ways of caring for the poor. We actually believe that this right here has a chance of transforming the world when you and I engage it with an open spirit. And that there's something beyond you and I, the greater story, the good news, that's worth giving to. You can go on there. You can check out our budget this year. There's a form to put your interest in Financial Peace University starting in February. Thank you, Brian and Kim, for being open to leading that. Again, the QR code on your card does not work, but you can write down midtown.church/budget, and it'll take you to the page I'm talking about. Now, here's the thing. There is so much more to living a life of generosity than just your money and your stuff. And so on the back of that card, I have a practice for us. And I want you to reflect on your life right now and consider, maybe outside of your stuff and your money, how might God be inviting you to grow in generosity from today? Because some of the things that we hold on to most are our opinions, our judgments. We hold on to our forgiveness like it's ours in the first place. We hold on to resentments and envy. This is the work, the deeper stuff that Jesus invites you and I to. And I know you want it because you want other people to be it. And again, I would argue that this is who God made you and I to be. So take 1 minute. Reflect on the back of that card. Now I invite you to circle and or write in an other. What isn't on that card? And then actually write in a few words, what does that invitation look like? What are you going to do from here? What do you want to grow in? And so take 1 minute, and then I'm going to invite us to stand and sing. If you're finished and are finishing, I invite you to stand and